Good day everyone, welcome to another video where today we are going to set up weapon types. So how we're going to do that? Well, let's go into our blueprints. Or wait, it's actually in first person blueprint. Blueprint, first person character. And in here, first off, we're going to remove touch controls. Why? Well, you'll see. Let's move this in a bit more, and it doesn't really matter, doesn't really affect the code, but I just like to keep it all clean and such. So let's, by alt clicking on pressed, let's disconnect it. Drag this down, we're going to use this later. And for now, let's right click and create a custom event by typing add custom event. And this event will actually call fire. And what we can do now is basically just call fire from when it is pressed. And as you can see, it is now recognized as a custom event. We compile this and play. It still works. Let's actually mute my volume. It still works like normal, but we can now change it. So what I want to create is a pulse fire type, a automatic fire type, and a semi-automatic. So semi-automatic, well, we basically have that covered. Let's delete it, and what we're going to do is create a new enumerator. So what is an enumerator? An enumerator is basically custom values that can be assigned to a variable and switch upon. So you know when you have a boolean, like using motion controllers, which we're actually going to delete in a bit. If we want to set it, it can either be on or off. With a gun offset, which is a vector-free variable. It has an X, Y, and Z value. We can create our own variable types with an enumerator. Let me show you. In our first person BP folder, we're going to go to blueprints and create a new enumeration. And I'm going to call it enum_fire type. And in here, we're going to create semi, auto, and pulse. So that's basically a burst fire type. I like to call it pulse. All right. Now, if we create a new variable, call this fire type, and remove using motion controllers because, well, we're not using motion controllers. And so this is equal to enum_fire type. Compile. And we drag it out, click get. So we get a reference to this variable and type in switch and assign press to it. We can now switch on our fire type. If you click this little button, it turns to an eye. And what that basically means is that if we're in our viewport, we can now, I did compile. We can now alter the fire type in our viewport without altering it in the blueprint. A little side note, but it will come in handy later when we're testing it out. So this is pretty cool. We have created basically a selection of sorts, which we can use to switch upon. We're going to need some more variables. So let's create a variable which will be a bool. And if it's a bool, you can put a little b in front of it, call it shooting. And fun thing with this is if they be shooting, if you drag it in, the b actually disappears. Why? Well, I don't know, but it's sort of the norm to call it b something if it's a boolean. No other variable really has that, but a boolean, well, just put a little b in front of it. It's kind of fun to see it disappear. Like, it's not confident enough to show itself. Sad little bee. Too small for this world. Alright, let's continue real quick. Create pulse amount. So this is the amount of bullets a single pulse will do. That's an integer. And we'll need one more, which is a float, which is fire rate. Let's make a float. And our fire rate, well, it's basically how fast our pulse rifle shoots, how fast our semi recovers, and how fast our auto shoots. I mean, it's fire rate. Everyone who's played a first-person shooter knows what it is. So let's start with semi. That's the easiest one. And just call the fire event. Or actually first, we need to set be shooting. So drag it out, click set. Be shooting to true. And add a delay. So this will basically wait for X seconds. And it's always seconds. So it's not like Unity where you can use a counter to count the amount of frames, and you will have to multiply that by time delta time. No, this is actual seconds. So we just plug in a fire rate, and fire rate is basically how long does it take for each bullet. So we set that to 0.1. That's a comfortable fire rate for me. It doesn't completely break everything because this is quite a complex system. You don't want this called too often. Like a game with really fast guns, like let's say Call of Duty, because it's the most standard FPS action you'll find. In there, they'll just use an audio loop as long as you're shooting. They'll use an animation which just keeps shooting. They'll use a muzzle flash which is always on there and just turns on and off instead of instantiating an entire particle. So that's the way most games do it, and we might take a crack at that later. That's not the highest concern right now. Let's just make it work. Alright, with that compiled, our semi actually works. But even if we set our fire rate at 2, so if we have to wait 2 seconds, it doesn't really do anything. Why not? Because, well, we don't actually reference to shooting. So let's add a branch, and let's say that you're not shooting. So this is also important when you're doing the pulse, because, well, during a pulse, let's set it to false. During a pulse, it's you shouldn't be able to shoot again, right? Yeah. All right, and now there's a great little trick. If we select all of these and we say, yeah, that's too much, man. There's too many nodes. I don't want this here. We'll just right click on them and hit collapse nodes, and we can call this fire_semi. Doesn't really matter what you call it. So is a collapsed graph. This is a collapsed graph, not R. I mean, it's singular. We're going to create more, but right now it is a collapsed graph. When we double press on it, we have our input, and it basically just executes this code. It doesn't actually affect anything. It doesn't affect performance or anything. It's just cleaner in the graph. All right, so when we move on to auto, we're going to have to set shooter to true. After which we're going to create a timer, and these timers by function name, so we can just plug in a name fire with a fire rate, which is the time between the loops. So this is awesome. It's really cool. This node just keeps looping the same event every so often, fire rate. So which is, in our scene, it is 2 seconds. So this is a really awesome node and has lots of uses, and I actually use it quite a lot. Well, even these 3 nodes are too much for me, so let's collapse them into fire_auto. By the way, you can just open them by double clicking on them, and you can go back by hitting the event graph up here. It basically works like a tree, like in your file browser, where if you go to download, you can still go back to this PC. Yeah? Cool. Alright, Pulse is a bit harder, and I want to keep this to the end. So let's go to released. We don't need any brush, but we do need a switch, because we only want this to happen if our weapon type is auto. You can actually remove that and just have this single reference and just put it there. Alright, so if it's auto, we're going to set shooting to false. So set shooting to false. And then we're going to clear our timer because we don't want to execute that action anymore. And the timer was fired. Alright, I'm just going to collapse these because, well, it makes it easier to understand that every one of these is a little section of code. Or, well, blocks, but it still is code. It still is programming. Let's set it fire auto reset. And let's double click on that and actually add another custom event. And let's call this stop auto firing. And like that. Sorry about that. Well, the stop auto firing will come in handy later when we're going to create a reload system. Alright, that's basically all we have to do here. What we're going to do now is create our pulse, which is going to require some thought. And also some more advanced programming. It's not too hard to follow if you just follow my steps. So let's first off set shooting to true. Set it to true. After which we're going to do a for loop. A for loop. Double click on the for loop and copy it in its entirety. So this is your standard macros, and in here, basically all your standard functions are stored. Let's create a macro here. Call this for loop with delay. Well, why don't I just create one in standard macros? That's because the standard macros is loaded in a different way and doesn't have an owner because it's just a blueprint collection, a macro library, which means that we can't actually use the delay node, only the task wait delay, in which we need a task owner, and not something we can really cast to all that easily. So this is the easier route, just pasting it in there. And we still need to do a few things because the inputs and outputs unfortunately don't get copied. So we need all these inputs and all these outputs. So let's start with execute. Let's go to inputs, add a new. Let's call it execute, all small lettering. Why? Because if you make it an exact pin, it disappears. Cool, right? It's just those little syntax things that I always find really interesting for some reason. But well, I am kind of a nerd. Let's call this one first index. First index, and it is an integer. Let's create another parameter. Call this last index. So if you're familiar with code, it is basically a for loop. It's really simple with the first and the last, but if you're familiar with programming, you'll know that the first index normally starts at 0, which means that 1 is actually added if we put in the normal last index. So that's why we use this first index and not just leave it at 0. Let's see. I think it goes in there or not. It's one or the other. Let's see. Yeah. So this one in value. First index in value of assign. Last index is basically the second check of the less or equal to condition. And then we need outputs, which is loop body, which is an execute. So you can actually have multiple executes. And let's add another one. Let's call this one completed, which will be when this branch is false, then it is done. And one more, this one will be an integer. Let's call this one index. And the index is this local variable which will be assigned, and one will be added each and every time it goes around. All right. But this is just the normal standard macros. We haven't really done anything. After this, we're going to need a delay. And as you can see, we actually have the thing now, the node. So make sure, if you can't find the node, make sure you're in your first person character and it's a local macro which you can add with macro up here, and you haven't created another macro in here because, well, you still can't use delay in here. Let me ask way delay. Wonder. No, you can't use delay, not even with context sensitive. All right, and how long should we wait? Well, we're going to create another input for that. So let's call this one delay. Give it the value of a float, compile it, and remove this for loop and drag in our for loop with delay. So our first index, we're going to change to 1 because I want to just plug in a number and don't have to worry about our for loop. So let's set it to 5 and a fire rate of, well, 0.1 is probably fine. And on loop body, we're going to fire. And when it's completed, we're going to have another delay of fire rate. This is optional, but I like having it here so we can shoot again instantly. And then we're going to set shooting to false. Index isn't used at this point, but it's kind of useful to have if we're ever going to use this macro again. All right, and last but not least, let's collapse these nodes to fire underscore pulse. All right, let's test it out. Let's put this to pulse, fire rate 2. Seems kind of long, done it. Oh, sorry. I might sound And as you can see, it now pulse fires. Hold up. It's trying to access a component. Why? It should kill afterwards. Or if it's false. Maybe it hits 2 things at the same time. Yeah, seems like that. It just hit 2 things at the same time and the engine got confused. But as you can see, we now have a pulse rifle. How cool is that? If we set this to auto, you can just hold it down. But something might feel off about this. As you can see, you don't instantly shoot. You will have to wait this amount of time, the 0.1, before it actually starts. So let's just add fire in there. So now when we shoot, and we set this timer. So now It feels a lot more like an actual gun. Pretty neat, right? Goodbye, chair. Was never going to work. Oh, good. Good damn. Alright. Well, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Just messing about a bit at the end there, but well, we created something pretty good, I think. I'll see you on the next one, where we're going to create different kind of guns you can switch through. So you can actually have different colored guns and different types of guns. See you then. Bye bye.